A home clash versus London rivals Chelsea awaits us, but is it fair to say all eyes are on Real Madrid from here on in? Is Gabriel Martinelli ready to start in attack? Mikel Arteta delivered an exciting update regarding Bukayo Saka, plus a comprehensive look ahead to Sunday's game. All of that and more to come on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are we? Happy Saturday. Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. I had to think about what my name was there for a second. It's been one of those mornings. I've been running around trying to get lots done so that I could sit down, record the podcast all in good time, and then begin once again on my jungle of a garden. Chopped some trees down yesterday. Bought a chainsaw a few months ago, finally took it out of the box and decided enough was enough. I needed to get out there and I needed to start cutting things down. Obviously, being as bad as I am at any sort of gardening or DIY for that matter, I have cut the tree at the wrong angle and seen it fall onto my fence and completely break the panel. Oh man. Anyway, we move. Now it's about getting rid of all the rubbish. So going to start a couple of bonfires, I think, today. That's on the agenda for a little bit later on in the day. So I thought I'd sit down around about late morning and record this podcast to you, bring you guys the preview of the Chelsea game. And yeah, it's a game that I think has got a really kind of weird feeling around it, hasn't it? I mean, I said in the intro there, are all eyes on Madrid? Certainly feels that way. It certainly feels like that's all people want to talk about. And it's understandable and natural given that we're in a really poor position in terms of the Premier League title race. It does feel like our eggs are very much firmly in that UEFA Champions League basket. Also, the fact that we're playing Real Madrid is the type of tie that draws all the attention anyway, right? Whether we were in the title race or not, yes, we'd be looking at this Chelsea game through a very different lens, and we'd certainly be more up for it and certainly be more nervous, I guess, and on edge because of the significance that this fixture could have held. But at the same time, a tie against Real Madrid is something that you're always going to talk about anyway, isn't it? And yeah, you know, you factor in where we're at in the title race, and yeah, it's a difficult one to get yourself up for, this one, in a lot of ways. Although it shouldn't be, because it's a London derby against a historic rival. It shouldn't be difficult to get yourself up for. But you know, I'm expecting the atmosphere at the Emirates Stadium to be a little bit flat. For a couple of reasons. First of all the reasons I've just explained. But secondly, because it's a 1:30 kickoff on a Sunday, which is never ideal, I don't think. It's obviously an early kickoff because the League Cup final takes place a little bit later on in the day. Liverpool meet Newcastle in that at Wembley. And so, yeah, I don't really know what to expect. What I feel we need is a strong performance and something to enjoy as Arsenal fans. The last few months have been really kind of arduous and difficult, haven't they? Because we've been through this period of injuries, and the injuries have subsequently led to us dropping off in terms of our level. And as a result of that, we've dropped some points in games that we really shouldn't have. And now we find ourselves in this position. So listen, it's been a horrible time. In a weird way, you know, even though the Premier League title thing's been unlikely for quite some time, the fact that it feels really unlikely now, I'm not sure. I beg your pardon, I couldn't stop the sneeze. I'm not sure that look, having that bit of hope would have been great because it gives you something to hold on to. It gives you something to kind of really kind of be excited for, and it gives you a focus for sure. But we probably weren't going to win it. And I'm not saying it's a good thing that we're out of it, but I guess it allows us to go into the game tomorrow with a little bit more relaxation, freedom. I don't know what the right word is. I'm just, yeah, I mean, I want to get myself up for it, but Chelsea are not the Chelsea of old. Chelsea are not that Chelsea side that repeatedly would get one over on us. We have really very much accelerated beyond them now, and Arsenal are unbeaten in each of their last 6 Premier League games against Chelsea. We've won 4 and drawn 2. That's our longest run without a defeat against them since a run of 19 matches back in a period between 1995 and 2005. Okay, so Arsenal very much on top when it comes to these two sides at the moment. Having said that, even though it meant a lot because of where the title race was at last season, I thoroughly enjoyed that 5-0 victory over them at the Emirates Stadium. So I think back to that, and I look back to that, and I think beating them matters. Beating them means something. And I think that's kind of the way we've got to look at tomorrow's game, because if we don't, we do run that risk of turning up, generating a kind of damp squib of an atmosphere, a flat atmosphere, and all of a sudden the game becomes a bit of a chore to follow, to watch, and that transmits onto the pitch, and the players probably feel that same way. You know, for us, it's really, really important. I keep saying it, but it's really, really important to me that we finish second. It's so important. And while Chelsea aren't a side I'm directly concerned by in that sense, obviously, there are a couple of other sides. I think mainly Manchester City, who are capable of putting that type of run together and who are capable of closing that gap. And if that happens, then it puts even more of a downer on the kind of end of the season. I know there's some people out there that go, just give it your everything in the Champions League, and whether we finish second or third, it doesn't really matter. To me, it matters, because if we finish runners-up 3 seasons consecutively, it's not that it's progress from last season, because it wouldn't be, right? We finished in that position last season, and we're definitely not going to take the title race down to the final day like we did last time. But if we finish second 3 consecutive seasons, it means that we've raised the level as a team, and then we've sustained that level, at least in terms of league position. There'll be debates and question marks around whether or not we've regressed this season. I personally prefer to save the post-mortem for the end of the campaign. But, you know, just maintaining that position, I think, is the first step. Progress is not always linear. I say it all the time. And sometimes you can make progress very quickly. You can take steps 1, 2, and 3 very quickly. And step maybe 4 is the hardest one, and you end up taking a little bit more time to kind of achieve that and get over that hurdle. So that's where I'm at on the game in terms of its significance, in terms of its importance. I am finding it a little bit difficult. And when I was talking yesterday about the stadium expansion stuff, I got a lot of comments from people who said that I was being a snob and that I was looking at it from the completely wrong sort of perspective, and how, you know, I'm an idiot for saying that actually, you know, maybe we could expand it a bit, but is a huge expansion imperative. People took that as me saying, well, the people that don't get to go every week don't deserve to go, so who cares about them? Which is not what I was saying. Those of you that listen to the show will know exactly what I meant, in that the need for an expansion comes when you are so successful that the demand is out of this world. And while the season ticket waiting list is very, very long, and all of that stuff is certainly true, you know, I've had another example of it this morning where I'm working at the Chelsea game tomorrow. I'm covering the game for radio. And so I've said to a couple of friends in a WhatsApp group, people who don't normally get to go and who are often complaining about not getting to go, I've said, guys, does anyone want a ticket for Chelsea tomorrow? None of them want it. Now, I'm not saying that that's how everybody looks at it. I'm not saying you know, that everybody feels that way, or that everybody would turn down tickets when they were offered their way. But you get where I'm going with it. Like, there is this kind of, like, when everything's going great, everybody's interested. And then when it's not going so great, like now in the Premier League, there's a massive drop-off in the interest. And so do you then prioritize expansion, knowing that that interest could drop off very, very quickly? Or do you prioritize spending money on the damn team and improving the team as much as you possibly can? Because I'd much prefer, personally, to see that. But hey, anyway, let's move on to Mikel Arteta's press conference, in which he provided a few updates, some interesting updates, an exciting one with regards to Bukayo Saka. Spoke a lot in the broadcast section about how proud he is, of course, of the fact that Miles Lewis-Skelly's been called up to the England squad. What that means for not just the individual, but for the club as well. It means a lot. Another Hale End Academy graduate coming through the ranks and going on to represent his country at international level is fantastic. We're all, of course, as Arsenal fans, incredibly proud of him. His rise has been incredible, very, very quick. And yeah, it's great to see. He was also talking about Bukayo Saka, but he gave a little bit more info on Bukayo Saka, you felt, in the embargoed section, which you can now watch. And there are obviously quotes from that floating around at the minute. But he did sort of say that Bukayo Saka's getting closer, that he's making very good progress. When asked where he'll be next week, obviously the club will be releasing a lot of players off for international duty. Bukayo Saka is going to be staying here, according to Mikel Arteta, and he'll be hopefully doing more with the ball at his feet. That means he'll be doing passing, shooting, running, etc., etc. And the next stage, Mikel Arteta revealed, is to get him training again with his teammates in a more competitive environment. And then another assessment can be conducted, and we can try and figure out exactly when Bukayo Saka is likely to be available. The Real Madrid game is not that far away, but it's far away enough, you feel, looking at it. April 8th is the first leg, for that to be a kind of aim for Bukayo Saka. Ideally, he'd get some minutes before then, whether that is with the 21s or whether that is in some of our games in between. I think we've got Fulham and Everton, I want to say, before we play Real Madrid, after obviously tomorrow's game. So it feels like, that's a really good target to aim for, and it's a realistic one. If he's back on the pitch, kicking the ball, shooting, passing, etc., etc., or he's going to be doing that in the coming days, 3 weeks feels like an amount of time in which it's realistic to be able to build him up to a level where he's at least able to start against Real Madrid in that first leg. And what a boost that would give us. Because, look, if we had met Real Madrid last season, nobody would have written us off. People would have looked at it and gone, you know what, this Arsenal team, they're one hell of a team, and they're defensively very good, and offensively they've got players that can make a difference. I'm not saying we would have ever been favourites against this juggernaut of European competition. That's what Real Madrid are. But we certainly wouldn't have been written off. Well, when we play them in about 3 weeks' time, if we do manage to get Bukayo Saka back and available, we'd only be one player short of our best team. We'd have the first choice defence certainly available to us. We'd have the first choice midfield available to us. And we'd have, if Saka returns, our first choice wide men available to us as well. It would only be that centre forward position in which we'd be lacking. So there's reason to be bold and to be confident and to believe that, in particular, if we can get him back and ready, that Arsenal can give that tie a real good go. But really positive news from Mikel Arteta. Really great to hear that Bukayo Saka's not far away. There was also some talk about Ben White. Now, this came off the back of Thomas Tuchel when doing his press conference, when revealing his England squad, basically making the point that the door wasn't closed for Ben White. It never was in his eyes. And I said for a long time that something had gone on behind the scenes, that this idea that Ben White just didn't care and didn't want to play for his country was a nonsense. He's taken a lot of stick for that. He's taken a lot of shit from people outside of Arsenal circles, from people in the media. I expect that to continue because people often like to presume that they know what happened in a situation where actually the reality is they had no clue. Ben White is a guy of principle, I think. Ben White is someone who is very, not cold. I don't think cold is the right word, but he has the capacity to go cold on something. And I actually think that's quite healthy in a really kind of high-pressured environment. I think you need to be able to just go zoop and switch everything off. Because if you take that crap home with you, if you get involved in some of the media stuff, if you get involved in all the back and forth, you could very, very easily find yourself being consumed by it. What I thought Ben White did really, really well during the whole England issue was that a lot of people would have expected him to come out and speak. And Ben White could have done that. And I think if he did do that, what he'd have ended up with was a kind of a 50-50 split in terms of those who support him versus those who don't, in terms of his stance around England, right? Ben White, when I say he has the capacity and the ability to just switch off and go cold, this is exactly what I mean. Because if that was me, and I was reading all this stuff in the papers about me that was completely inaccurate, and I was listening to pundits on the radio, on the television, on YouTube, or wherever, on podcasts, slagging me off and saying I turn my back on my country and all the rest of it, I wouldn't be able to hold myself back from responding. But Ben White's been able to do that. He's been able to switch it off, go cold. And it's probably allowed him to get through the situation a lot more easier. When he does return for England, whenever that might be, he will face some boos, I think, from the England supporters, because the England supporter base is not made up of Arsenal fans, right? There's going to be generally less sympathy towards him. But to me, listen, we don't know what happened. I don't think if I were an England fan, I'm not an England fan. I don't really give two shits, to be honest, about what England achieve or don't achieve. If I were an England fan and I were really an avid England fan, I think because I wouldn't know the situation and I wouldn't understand the ins and outs of it, I think I'd be able to kind of just put it to one side and look at what Ben White is as a footballer. And then I'd be thinking, does he improve my team? Absolutely he does. Whether that's Ben White coming in as a right back option or whether that's Ben White coming in as a centre back, I think it improves England's team. I was looking at their team during the European Championships, and I know Mark Gay ended up doing quite well at the tournament, in fairness to him. But I remember at the time thinking, well, who's going to be that second centre-back? Who's going to play alongside John Stones? And there was a lot of pressure on Mark Gay because not everybody, it's fair to say, was convinced that he could do that job and that he could step up into that role. But, fair play to him, he did great. But being able to go Ben White, John Stones in the heart of your defence, maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back, and then obviously figuring out that left back situation, we got a solution for you there as well, Miles Lewis-Skelly. All of a sudden, that team looks much better and much more balanced and much more well-rounded. So if I were an England fan, I think I'd go, I don't know what happened here, but you're a bloody good player and I want you as part of the setup, and I'd get behind him. That isn't going to be the case for a lot of people. I'm sure there's going to be booing. The Patriots are going to stand there sort of moaning and complaining, it's the ultimate crime. Ben White didn't want to play for England, blah, 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 blah. But I think if I were them, I would want to take him back and with open arms. It was interesting as well that Tuchel kind of alluded to the fact that he's coming back from an injury, hence why he wasn't selected, etc., etc. But also in the embargoed bit of the press conference, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, go back and watch it. Mikel Arteta was very, very defensive of Ben White. It was almost as if he's trying to say, there's a lot more to this story than you know. Ben White didn't want to sort of go and expose exactly what happened. And so Mikel Arteta probably feels that it's not his place. But he certainly felt, I think it was his place to defend his player. And he does exactly that. And when you look at how strongly Mikel Arteta defends Ben White there, it does lead you to think that there was probably definitely, in fact, probably or definitely, you can't be probably or definitely, there was definitely, based on Arteta's response, if you want to read into that, something more to this situation and to this scenario. Okay, shall we talk a little bit about Sunday's opponents? Let's share some thoughts on Chelsea's season. It was a season that started with so much promise under Enzo Maresca, to the point where people were talking about them as potential title challengers. Obviously, they've faded away. Credit to Enzo Maresca, I think from the very beginning, he said, whoa, slam the brakes on this chat. We are not at that level. We're not in that place yet. People said that he was playing it down deliberately, etc., etc. But I think Enzo Maresca, who works with these players day in, day out, he knew exactly what he was talking about. He knew exactly what the limitations of his group were, and he knew exactly what he had at his disposal. And having been involved in a Premier League title-winning team, having won the championship last year, Enzo Maresca knows what it takes, and he clearly didn't feel that he had that within his group and within his ranks. The season's kind of leveled out. People have sort of accused them of tailing off. I don't think that's fair. I think that they were always top four contenders at the start of the season, given the position they finished up under Maurizio Pochettino last time out. And right now they are 2 points clear going into the weekend of Manchester City, who are in fifth. So they're in fourth position. So it's about par with regards to where I expected them to be. There's been a lot of chat recently about Cole Palmer. Obviously had an outstanding season last time around. He was really, really great for the Blues. And he continues to put up really, really good numbers if you look at his overall campaign. I know people are talking about his recent form as a bit of a negative and as a bit of a problem. But generally, he still had a really, really good season numbers-wise. He has failed to score in each of his past 10 appearances. 7 of them have been league games, with his last goal coming against Bournemouth back on January the 14th. He's gone 683 minutes without scoring in the Premier League, attempting 29 shots in this time. You can bet that Cole Palmer is going to rediscover his shooting boots tomorrow at Emirates Stadium, because that's just the way it goes. But look, you look at him and you think about all the stick that he gets. I know Cole Palmer's numbers have been boosted by the fact that he takes penalties. And Chelsea as a team, and I haven't looked at the stats to sort of confirm this, but certainly feel like a team that get a lot of penalties relative to other people. But let me just put this into a bit of context for you, okay? Because there are people sleeping on Cole Palmer, and there are people sort of really accusing him of this dramatic drop-off and dip and the rest of it. Bukayo Saka's best goal-scoring season in the Premier League is 15 goals. That's his best. That's his best tally. Cole Palmer, with what? 8, 9 games to go, has got 14 this season with 6 assists. So this idea that he's been crap this season and had no impact is completely nonsensical and really, really far-fetched. Has he lived up to the standards that he managed last season in terms of his overall performances? No, but he's still a very young player, and I think last season caused the level of expectation around him to just shoot through the ceiling. And I don't think we've ever kind of, as a sort of media or as a sort of footballing community, been able to kind of put a lid on that and understand where Cole Palmer is actually at. He's a massive threat. He's a big concern for me going into tomorrow's game. And we have to be wary of him. Defensively, I always feel like this Chelsea team are quite vulnerable. Not a particularly big fan of the goalkeeper. Not a particularly big fan of some of their back four. I don't think that's an area of the squad in which they've invested wisely. I think we know Chelsea's transfer policy has been quite strange. It's been to go and buy players for the future. It's been to go and buy players that are still developing for vast amounts of money and then tying them down on these mega contracts that they hope will be a benefit in terms of how they can spread that cost, amortization, all of that stuff. But also I think they feel like it puts them in a position where they could potentially sell these players down the line should they go boom. The problem is not that many of them have gone boom just yet, and so people are led to questioning that transfer philosophy again. They've lost 3 of their last 6 in the Premier League, so they're not in the greatest form, and their last 2 victories have come against, Leicester and Southampton, games you'd expect them to win. So maybe talk of Chelsea having turned the corner is a little bit premature. In terms of team news for them, Enzo Maresca's confirmed that Robert Sanchez will continue in goal. Wesley Fofana and Romeo Lavia both come back into contention. They were, of course, ineligible for Thursday's win against Copenhagen. Whilst Nicholas Jackson and Noni Madueke are still out, they could return after the international break. In terms of some of the statistics around this game, the head-to-head, Arsenal unbeaten in each of their last 6 Premier League games versus Chelsea, which I mentioned a little bit earlier on. That's their longest run without a league defeat against them since a run of 19 games between 1995 and 2005. And the Blues are in danger of losing 3 consecutive top-flight fixtures at Emirates Stadium for the first time. The last time they were beaten in 3 successive league games away to the Gunners was between 2001 and 2003, and that was back at Highbury. In terms of my starting 11, let me just see if I can share this with you because I'm using a different bit of software. I really should have set this up earlier on. Let me see if I can do this. Hold on a second. Let's see if we can just very, very quickly remove the graphic that I put together for the game the other night ahead of PSV. We were messing about with the team, and I can tell you that the team I've got on the screen in front of me now is almost certainly not going to be the team that Mikel Arteta picks at the weekend. So hold on a second. Let me just try and fix this. Apologies. This is the problem with doing these things live, right? If I share to the screen, here we go. Look at that. Look at that. Fantastic. Okay, so Raya in goal. I think it will be... Look, there's a temptation to continue with Ben White because I think he's the best right back that we have, and I really think we've missed him. As good as Timber's been, I think there are certain things that Ben White brings to the picture that maybe Jurriën Timber doesn't in an offensive sense, right? But I think it's too soon probably to start Ben White again. Remember, we're building him back up to fitness. Can he get some minutes in the game? Yes. And could Jurriën Timber do with a breather? I'm sure he could. But it feels to me like it would be too soon, too much too soon to throw Ben White in again from the start. Centre-back pairing, easy. Don't even need to think about this. Saliba and of course Gabriel Magalhaes, who played the other night, and one of them was going to have to play, you felt, and it was Gabriel that got the nod. On the left-hand side, I'm going with Miles Lewis-Skelly for this one. Keep him there. Keep him going. I think he's better equipped defensively to deal with any threat that they might have down their right-hand side. And it's strange for me to say that, right? Because Calafiori, who'd be the other option that I would look at and turn to, he's a centre-back. So you'd think that defensively, by trade, he'd be stronger. But I think Miles Lewis-Skelly's the one for me at the minute. I think Calafiori's game is just a little bit hit and miss at the minute. Partey would sit at the base of my midfield. Martin Odegaard would come back into the 11. Declan Rice, who started the game in midweek but didn't play the entire 90 minutes, he'd come back in that left 8 position. Up front, I'm actually going with Leandro Trossard myself. I would go Ethan Nwaneri. I'd bring him back into the team over on the right-hand side. And on the left flank, I'm going to start this man, Gabriel Martinelli. It's important that we start to build him up again as well, because we could really do with him. And look, looking at that team there, okay, when you put Bukayo Saka back in on that right flank, and that sounds a little bit harsh on Ethan Nwaneri, it is literally our best team, barring the centre forward. You know, you've got that option at left back, Calafiori or Miles Lewis-Skelly. Right now, I think it's out of those two. You can pick whichever one you want for the game, horses for courses and all of that stuff. Timber playing at right back doesn't weaken us. I would argue that our very, very best team, when he's ready, would include Ben White in that. And maybe you move Timber over to left back if you're playing against a really difficult opponent. For instance, if we go to the Bernabeu, I would feel more comfortable defensively with Timber playing on the left-hand side as a left back and Ben White coming in at right back. The back four of White, Saliba, Gabriel and Timber, for me, is the most secure. So, you know, we've got our options back. People are starting to return. We need to build Martinelli's fitness back up. We're obviously going to need to build Bukayo Saka back up as well. But we'd be without simply just our centre forward. And that makes us competitive again. Like, it's not ideal. And it's a very important position on the pitch, I would argue. But it does certainly make us competitive again. So, yeah, the team I would go for to start against Chelsea: Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel and Lewis-Skelly, Partey, Rice and Odegaard in midfield, Nwaneri on the right, Martinelli on the left and Trossard through the middle. Some people have suggested that maybe Martinelli should be the one to play through the middle. I'm not dead against that. I'd quite like to see him and Trossard rotate maybe. Maybe that's something we can do to try and catch opposition out, to try and sort of make ourselves less predictable. We've been too predictable, I think, over the last few months. It's been one of the big problems we've had. Some would argue that Mikel Merino deserves to continue up front. I mean, I don't think Mikel Merino's done badly. I don't. I think when you're judging what looks good for Mikel Merino at centre forward, you've got to apply the context to it. The fact that he's a midfielder, the fact that he hasn't played that much football this season, the fact that he's still adjusting to a new team. And it's not a new league for him because he played here a few years ago for Newcastle, but it's still different to what he's been doing over the last few years. When you consider all of that stuff, I don't think Mikel Merino's done badly. But has he done so well that I would persist with that even when I've got Martinelli, Trossard, Nwaneri, and soon, hopefully, Bukayo Saka available? No, I wouldn't. I don't think it's been that good. I don't think it's been worthy of sort of persisting with. But he's scored some good goals. His finishing's been really good. There's not a great deal more you could have asked from Mikel Merino that was realistic. And so it's not a slight on the player, but I'd rather have forwards playing as forwards. It's as simple as that for me. So that's my team. In terms of my prediction, I'm going to go for a 2-0 Arsenal win. That's what I feel like we're going to see. And it would be a nice one in terms of sort of lifting the mood, wouldn't it? Beating your London rivals, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Regardless of how you feel about the overall picture, it should always be something that you enjoy and that you cherish, particularly when it's them or Spurs, for sure. Okay, should we take a few of your questions and thoughts from the live chat before we sign out? Let's pick on a few comments that have been coming through during the live stream. What have we got? Just on the stadium stuff, because we talked about the stadium expansion plans a little bit earlier on. On the volley says, but will increasing the expansion decrease ticket prices? I don't think so. I'd be shocked if that was the case. I mean, we've seen our season tickets rise again in terms of the prices. I don't and any expansion, by the way, probably wouldn't happen until like 2028, 2029. So, this is something that's pretty far down the river still. It's not something that's imminent. But would I guess that the ticket prices would go down as a result of that expansion? No. I think it would be something that is done in order to try and sort of satisfy the want for more tickets. But businesses, when they're doing well, they want to get more people in the door. But does that necessarily mean they're going to reduce the ticket prices? I think it'd be a lovely touch if they did. And I think they need to at least put a freeze on the ticket prices going into the following season, because it's 2 seasons now of rises. So I think they could, score a PR goal basically by doing that stuff. But am I sitting here with any confidence looking 2 years, 3 years even down the line and saying they're definitely going to reduce the prices if they increase the capacity? My bet right now would be no. So no, I don't believe that is something that would happen. Wandering Mitchell says, like your confidence, Harry, regarding the 2-0. What else have we got? Maybe Chef says, don't get to watch live very often. Been trying to tune in more recently, though, to the lives. Enjoy the rational conversation and great insight. Thanks again. Thank you so much, mate, for your support and for tuning in. Some suggestions that Calafiori should play at centre forward. I mean, when we were really in that desperate situation pre-Martinelli's return, I think that's something that was I don't know if I want to call it a sensible suggestion, but it was a suggestion, and one that, when you actually broke it down and thought about it, and you look at the way the guy runs forward and the way the guy finishes chances, didn't feel like the most wild thing in the world. But to say it's something that you would do now with Martinelli returning, I think is a little bit of a stretch. Not for me. Not for me anyway. Okay, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner pod with me, your host, Harry Symeou. I'm going to be back shortly, tomorrow morning with more, and I look forward to speaking to you guys then. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about Mikel Arteta's attacking approach, but we're going to do that, hopefully, if I can get there in time, from the Emirates Stadium. So that'll be cool. Podcast coming to you live from there, live or pre-recorded depending on the internet connection, but we'll get it out to you tomorrow anyway. And it's with regards to something he said a couple of press conferences ago that I've kind of been sitting on, because I've wanted to sort of process my thoughts around. I think it's a really interesting conversation. Can't wait to have it with you guys on the next episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner pod. Until then, take care of yourselves. All the best. Have a great day. Goodbye.